Behind the glittering facade of Hollywood's golden age lurked some of entertainment's most ruthless predators. While their on-screen personas charmed millions, these legendary actresses were orchestrating campaigns of psychological warfare that would make today's cancel culture look like child's play. We're talking about women who didn't just throw tantrums. They systematically destroyed careers, shattered dreams, and left their victims with psychological scars that lasted decades. Today, we're exposing the calculated cruelty of Hollywood's most feared leading ladies. These weren't just temperamental stars having bad days. These were master manipulators who weaponized their fame to inflict maximum damage on anyone who dared cross their path. From deliberate physical violence caught on camera to behind-the-scenes psychological torture that drove victims to nervous breakdowns, the stories you're about to hear will forever change how you view cinema's most beloved icons. Joan Crawford didn't just want to be a star, she wanted to be the only star. Her approach to eliminating competition was so methodical and devastating that fellow actresses would literally flee Hollywood rather than face her wrath. Crawford's weapon of choice wasn't her famous wire hangers. It was something far more sinister. She collected secrets like other people collect stamps, then deployed them with surgical precision to destroy anyone who threatened her position. The most infamous example of Crawford's calculated cruelty began in 1935 when she discovered that rising star Bette Davis had fallen deeply in love with actor Franchot Tone during the filming of Dangerous. Crawford didn't want Tone. She wanted to hurt Davis. Multiple witnesses later confirmed that Crawford pursued Tone specifically because she knew it would devastate her rival. She succeeded beyond her wildest dreams, marrying Tone and watching as Davis's heartbreak played out in the tabloids. But Crawford's cruelty extended far beyond romantic sabotage. She maintained a network of informants throughout Hollywood who fed her information about other actresses' weaknesses, financial troubles, and personal scandals. When a younger actress named Margaret Sullivan began being considered for roles Crawford wanted, mysterious rumors about Sullivan's private life suddenly began circulating among studio executives. While never proven, industry insiders knew Crawford was behind the Whisper campaign that ultimately stalled Sullivan's promising career. Crawford's treatment of her own household staff revealed the everyday sadism that cameras never captured. Former employees described elaborate rituals of humiliation, including being forced to stand perfectly still for inspection before dinner parties. One maid recalled Crawford dumping a drawer of perfectly folded lingerie onto the floor because one item had a microscopic crease, then forcing her to refold everything, while Crawford watched and criticized every movement. This wasn't perfectionism. It was psychological torture disguised as standards. If Joan Crawford was a master strategist, Bette Davis was a battlefield commander who ruled through fear and intimidation. Davis didn't hide her cruelty behind false friendships. She deployed it like a weapon in broad daylight, reducing grown men to tears and ending careers with a single devastating comment. Her fellow actors described working with Davis as psychological warfare, never knowing when she would strike or how brutal the attack would be. Davis's most notorious display of calculated violence occurred during the filming of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. The scene called for her character to kick Joan Crawford's character in the head, and Davis saw it as the perfect opportunity for revenge. Multiple witnesses, including director Robert Aldrich, confirmed that Davis delivered the kick with such force that Crawford required stitches. When confronted about the incident, Davis's response was chilling in its casual dismissal. "I barely touched her." Crawford got her revenge during a later scene where Davis had to drag her across the room. Knowing that Davis suffered from chronic back problems, Crawford secretly loaded her costume with heavy objects and wore a weightlifter's belt to make herself as heavy as possible. "There is a way of making it easy on the actor who is doing the carrying," director Aldrich later revealed, but Crawford wanted Bette to suffer. Davis finished the scene screaming in agony while Crawford calmly returned to her dressing room. But Davis's cruelty wasn't limited to her famous rival. During the filming of All About Eve, Davis systematically tormented a young Marilyn Monroe, whom she considered an untalented starlet. Davis would loudly criticize Monroe's acting ability in front of the entire crew, and deliberately sabotaged takes by making mistakes whenever Monroe performed well, forcing the inexperienced actress to repeat emotionally draining scenes until she was reduced to tears. Davis defended her reign of terror with a philosophy that revealed her true nature. "Until you're known in my profession as a monster, you're not a star." She viewed kindness as weakness and weaponized her reputation for cruelty to maintain her position at the top of Hollywood's hierarchy. This wasn't the behavior of a perfectionist. It was the calculated strategy of a woman who understood that fear was more powerful than admiration. Miriam Hopkins elevated on-set sabotage to an art form. While modern audiences may not remember her name, industry veterans from the 1930s and 40s described her as the most skillfully destructive actress in Hollywood. Hopkins didn't just want to steal scenes. She wanted to destroy them for everyone else, leaving her co-stars looking incompetent while she emerged triumphant. Her signature technique involved what colleagues called performance assassination. Hopkins would rehearse one approach to a scene, allowing her co-stars to adjust their timing and emotional responses accordingly. Then, during actual filming, she would completely change her delivery, timing, and sometimes even her dialogue, making their carefully practiced responses appear awkward and amateurish. The result was that Hopkins looked brilliant, while her co-stars looked like amateurs who couldn't keep up. Director William Wyler, who worked with Hopkins on multiple films, described her as terribly difficult and a real nightmare to direct. He revealed that Hopkins would deliberately move during other actors' close-ups, forcing expensive retakes, and would try to distract the camera from her co-stars' performances by adjusting her costume or hair at crucial moments. She had a sixth sense for knowing exactly when to sabotage a moment, Wyler later said. Hopkins' rivalry with Bette Davis became legendary for its calculated viciousness. During the production of The Old Maid, Hopkins deployed every trick in her arsenal to undermine Davis's performance. She would speak her lines differently in each take, making it impossible for Davis to react consistently, and would deliberately step on Davis's lines or interrupt her during emotional moments. The tension became so unbearable that the film's production was repeatedly delayed, while the director tried to manage Hopkins' sabotage. Perhaps most revealing was Hopkins' treatment of younger actresses who might pose future competition. She would invite them to her dressing room under the pretense of offering career guidance, then deliberately give advice designed to damage their reputations or performances. One starlet recalled Hopkins suggesting she speak louder during a quiet, dramatic scene, advice that resulted in the director berating the newcomer for overacting, while Hopkins watched with obvious satisfaction. Vivien Lee created two of cinema's most iconic characters, but her off-screen behavior was often more dramatic than anything captured on film. While her struggle with bipolar disorder explains some of her volatility, colleagues consistently described a calculated cruelty that went far beyond mental health challenges. Lee seemed to take particular pleasure in targeting those she perceived as having the stable lives she'd been denied. During the filming of Gone with the Wind, Lee's perfectionist standards became a weapon of mass destruction, aimed at her fellow cast members. When she felt scenes weren't meeting her exacting expectations, she would deliberately sabotage them by making mistakes or changing her performance, forcing exhausted cast and crew to repeat physically demanding sequences numerous times. But it was her treatment of supporting actresses that revealed her true nature. Olivia de Havilland, who played Melanie, experienced Lee's cruelty firsthand during a scene where de Havilland's character was lying down. According to multiple witnesses, Lee deliberately stepped on de Havilland's hand with her full weight, then smiled when de Havilland cried out in pain. This wasn't an accident, it was calculated assault disguised as a performance mishap. Lee reserved special venom for actresses she considered untalented or unworthy of sharing the screen with her. During production of Ship of Fools, she tormented co-star Lee Marvin with constant criticism and would loudly mock his technique to other cast members. She also deliberately ruined takes when the camera was focused on anyone other than herself, using subtle facial expressions or slight movements that would draw attention away from her scene partners. Even her marriage to Laurence Olivier wasn't safe from her manipulative cruelty. Friends described Lee deliberately flirting with other men in Olivier's presence, then creating dramatic scenes accusing him of not loving her enough, when he reacted with understandable jealousy. She seemed to take obvious pleasure in manipulating Olivier's emotions and watching him struggle with her psychological games. Veronica Lake's iconic peekaboo hairstyle made her one of the most recognizable stars of the 1940s. But behind that sultry facade lurked what industry insiders called the witch with the peekaboo bangs. Lake's cruelty often stemmed from her alcoholism and untreated mental health issues, but even accounting for these challenges, colleagues described a deliberate meanness that went far beyond personal demons. Lake had an uncanny ability to identify and exploit people's deepest insecurities. During the filming of This Gun for Hire with Alan Ladd, she discovered that the actor was sensitive about his 5 feet 6 inches height. Rather than showing professional courtesy, Lake proceeded to wear unnecessarily high heels on set and make constant references to his stature, even though they were supposed to be building romantic chemistry on screen. Crew members recalled Ladd looking visibly distressed by her relentless taunting. Her treatment of female co-stars was particularly vicious. Actress Freddie Bartholomew recalled Lake deliberately ruining her close-ups by making distracting movements off-camera, or suddenly changing the timing of her dialogue to throw off Bartholomew's performance. When Bartholomew finally asked her to stop, Lake's response revealed her true character: learn to act through it or get out of the business. Lake's cruelty toward crew members became the stuff of Hollywood legend. She would deliberately spill coffee on costumes to force wardrobe staff to work unpaid overtime, knowing they couldn't complain without risking their jobs. During night shoots, she would disappear to her trailer for hours, knowing that every minute of delay cost the production money and kept exhausted crew members from going home to their families. The most disturbing aspect of Lake's behavior was how calculated it appeared to be. Even at the height of her alcoholism, witnesses noted that her cruelty seemed most targeted when she was relatively sober, suggesting that some of her difficult behavior was strategic rather than solely the result of substance abuse. Directors increasingly refused to work with Lake despite her box office appeal, and her career decline came swiftly as word spread about her unnecessary cruelty. June Allison cultivated one of Hollywood's greatest disconnects between public image and private reality. While audiences adored her as the wholesome girl next door, those who worked with her encountered what director David Miller called the most skillfully cruel woman I've ever met in the film business. Allison's technique was more insidious than the explosive outbursts of her contemporaries. She specialized in psychological warfare disguised as kindness. Allison's method involved maintaining her sweet persona in public settings, while engaging in systematic emotional abuse behind closed doors. Film crews recalled her smiling warmly for publicity photos, then turning to verbally eviscerate support staff the moment cameras stopped rolling. She was always careful to ensure her outbursts remained private enough to protect her valuable public image while maximizing the psychological damage to her victims. Her targeted cruelty toward competing actresses became legendary among Hollywood insiders. When working with younger female co-stars, Allison would offer seemingly friendly advice about makeup, costumes, or performance choices, all deliberately designed to make them look worse on camera or alienate them from the director. One actress recalled Allison suggesting she try a more natural makeup look for a romantic scene, advice that resulted in the actress appearing washed out and sickly on film. Perhaps most disturbing was Allison's treatment of her husband, actor-director Dick Powell. Friends described witnessing shocking emotional abuse when the couple thought they were alone, with Powell sometimes emerging from private conversations with Allison, looking shell-shocked and defeated. The contrast between her public image as a devoted wife and her private behavior toward Powell was so stark that several colleagues began documenting the incidents, fearing for Powell's mental health. Allison maintained detailed information about other actresses' weaknesses, insecurities, and past mistakes, using this intelligence to systematically undermine potential rivals. Several promising careers stalled after crossing paths with Allison, though she maintained plausible deniability about her involvement. Her approach was so sophisticated that victims often didn't realize they were being manipulated until the damage was already done. Paulette Goddard's beautiful face masked one of Hollywood's most calculating minds. Her rise from Ziegfeld girl to major star wasn't just due to talent. It was the result of a ruthlessly strategic approach to relationships that left numerous casualties in its wake. Unlike the explosive personalities of other difficult stars, Goddard specialized in behind-the-scenes manipulation and carefully planned social sabotage. Goddard's technique involved befriending other actresses and gaining their confidence during vulnerable moments. Once she had collected sufficient compromising information, she would begin a subtle campaign of control, making casual references to their secrets in public settings, just enough to remind them of her power without explicitly revealing anything. This psychological stranglehold allowed her to manipulate her victims' career choices and personal relationships. During her marriage to Charlie Chaplin, Goddard demonstrated her talent for isolation and control. Those who worked in the Chaplin household reported that she would intercept messages, forget to pass along important information, and gradually poison Chaplin against anyone she viewed as a threat to her influence. Friends who had known Chaplin for decades found themselves inexplicably shut out of his life, only later realizing they had become victims of Goddard's systematic campaign. Goddard was notorious for spreading damaging rumors about actresses competing for roles she wanted. When she and Katharine Hepburn were both considered for the female lead in The Philadelphia Story, mysterious stories about Hepburn being difficult to work with suddenly intensified in industry circles. While never proven, many believed Goddard was behind the Whisper campaign that nearly cost Hepburn the career-defining role. Her treatment of domestic staff revealed her true nature when cameras weren't rolling. Former household employees described her deliberately setting impossible standards, then berating them mercilessly when they failed to meet unrealistic expectations. One former maid recalled Goddard dumping a drawer of perfectly organized items onto the floor because she claimed to detect microscopic dust particles, then forcing the maid to clean everything again while she watched and criticized the technique. These women didn't just break hearts, they methodically destroyed careers, shattered dreams, and left lasting psychological damage that echoed through generations. What makes their behavior even more chilling is how calculated and strategic it was. These weren't spontaneous outbursts of temperament. They were carefully orchestrated campaigns of psychological warfare, designed to eliminate competition and maintain power at any cost. The true cost of fame in Hollywood's golden age wasn't measured in money or publicity. It was measured in the wreckage of human relationships and the countless dreams that were crushed beneath the designer heels of these master manipulators. While modern audiences remember them for their glamour and talent, industry veterans knew the truth. Behind every iconic performance was a trail of victims who paid the price for these women's relentless pursuit of stardom. Their legacy serves as a dark reminder that the golden age of Hollywood was built on more than just talent and ambition. It was constructed on a foundation of calculated cruelty that would make today's most notorious divas look like amateurs. The next time you watch one of their classic films, remember that the real drama was happening behind the cameras, where these legendary actresses were writing their own scripts of manipulation, betrayal, and psychological destruction.